I chose the first reading, which is from Thomas Merton's autobiography, for a couple of reasons. One is that Thomas Merton was a local, at least for a while. Some of you will know who he was, and for some of you, you may not know. And I first found out who Thomas Merton was about 15 years ago when I went on my very first ever spiritual retreat. I bring so many prayers and so much affection from St. James's Piccadilly in London. We are honored to be in this evolving partnership with St. Bart's. Having arrived here a few days ago, my own sense of connection, dare I say, a sense of belonging with this community, with this parish, just continues to deepen. So thank you for your welcome, and thank you especially to Peter and to the clergy, the staff, the volunteers, the congregation, everyone who makes this possible. Welcome takes many forms. And when I was on my very first retreat, sent there, really, very much sent there by a very kind priest long before this ordination thing was even an idea, at least on the horizon for me. God's idea, but not yet shared by me as my idea. And every once in a while, I'm still like, God, are you sure that this is your idea? Each one of us has a ministry, and as we celebrate and remember the baptism of Christ, whether you are baptized or not, it is such a moment. Every moment is like this. Every Eucharist is like this, but it is such a moment in the church year to rediscover, or perhaps discover in some tiny way for the first time, who you really are, who we really are. God names God's Son as beloved, as loved infinitely beyond anything that anyone could ever ask or imagine. But that's not where it ends, that's where it starts. It's like a little pebble that's thrown into a clear pond, and then the ripples are what it's all about. But also, the water in the pond, all the pebbles, every pond, every molecule, every generation. This city, London, every place, every time. And I found out today that St. Bart's is celebrating its bicentenary in just a few years' time, in 2035, is that right? And the building is newer than that, and all of us are, I'm pretty sure, as human beings, newer than that. We may not feel like that sometimes, but we're pretty much newer than that. 200 years in some ways is a long time, and in other ways, not just for God, but over the course of the planet's history, is just a twinkling of an eye. And so a couple of thousand years ago, when John and Jesus are standing in this strange place, John says, "No, my dude," remember they're cousins. They're about the same age. They're 6 months apart. "I am not doing this for you. I baptize all over the place, but not you, not here. This makes no sense." And Jesus says, "Yes, but what if it did make sense?" And that's kind of what Jesus does, right? Where it's like, oh, but maybe this is a thing. Jesus, in asking for, in saying this is right to do, not demanding. Jesus doesn't demand anything of anyone. He doesn't force anybody to do anything. And notice the way we have in our reading that there is mutual consent, which is precious. Everybody's got to say yes to one another and has got to say yes to God. And you can take, I can take all the time in the world, and it is okay to say no. And that is, in many ways, the freedom and the joy of yes. If the yes is a true yes, if it's real, then it comes from the heart of who you really are and who we really are with God. As soon as you get a kind of an expectation or a demand involved, this is happening today because I say so, then that's, at least personally, that's not the God I know, and that's not the God I love and worship. I love and worship and know the God of invitation. And that, to me, is so important as far as baptism is concerned. Thomas Merton, like many of us, who I first encountered in a book on retreat about 15 years ago in a convent, which was originally founded in the 12th century in Kent in England. More on that if you wish later. If you want to know about Malling Abbey, I could talk about that for a good long time. I'm one of those people that's like, I'm a friend with a capital F. The nuns know me, I know them. It's got that vibe. Sister Bartimaeus is my favorite. And Sister Bartimaeus is my favorite because she used to really, really scare me. And one day I sat next to her at a meal, and all the meals are silent, and they don't really do this so much anymore, but many years ago they did, and it was Sunday, so there was tons of dessert everywhere, and there were only 4 of us as guests who were staying. And Sister Bartimaeus, who really scared me because she is fierce as anything, and now she's the guest sister. The trouble is that she knows she's scary and does not care. So if you know you're scary and you do not care, power to you, that's great. But if at the same time you just want to make a little gentle, tender room for someone, that's also probably a good idea. And that day she made a little bit of gentle, tender room for me because she looked around knowing that I'd never been part of this communal meal experience before. And maybe some of you here, you've never been part of the Eucharist before. How would you know what to do? How would I know what to do? You need a good host. You need the care of God as well as the love and the care of community. And she looks at me, and this is a silent meal. You never know how loud a knife and fork is until you eat in a monastery or a convent. It's a whole thing. Never take celery from the buffet in a monastery. Trust me, I have made that mistake more than once, and I don't learn. Crackers. Don't eat crackers in a monastery. It's not good. And so she looks at me and very quietly she whispers, "Eat as much dessert as you want. My sisters, they won't take seconds, but will notice if you don't have seconds." Duly noted, I thought to myself, as approximately a size 16. I thought, great, this is excellent news. Let's go. And that is a sign of love and care and tenderness and trust. And that's the place where I found Thomas Merton. The 7-Story Mountain is his autobiography, which was his first big hit, his first bestseller. And it was about how he wandered around as a young person, not sure about what to do or how to do it. And then eventually, in a way which was not obvious and which was really quite gradual and which had lots of strange twists and turns, in New York, found his way to particular places, particular times, particular people. And you may wonder in this reading who Lax was. Robert Lax was one of Thomas Merton's best friends, and he himself was kind of not so focused on the quest for God. And yet Merton and he trusted one another as strong, deep companions and friends for a very long time. And so how shocking is it that Merton, when he reflects on this conversation, which was so pivotal for him, with a friend, not a priest, not someone who was trying to draw him into baptism necessarily, but someone who just really cared about him and knew about him as the person that he was, the whole person that he was. A little bit like John the Baptist and Jesus. His friend Lax was being Jesus for him because Merton's like, look, I'm trying to figure this out, but not this, not here, not today. And Robert Lax, his buddy, says, "Don't you believe that God will make you what God created you to be if you will consent to let God do it?" And I read that again just a few months ago, and for what it's worth, in terms of the time of life that I was having and the day I was having, and I'm a pretty emotional person anyway, I cry very easily, I had a kind of a moment with that. Don't you believe that God's invitation is so wide and so deep that the pebble in the pond draws us all in? But we get to choose, and that's the best as well as sometimes kind of the worst part. You get to choose. We must be invited to choose. Otherwise, it's no community at all. It's just people who are demanding or expecting one another to do things, and there's a different kind of Christianity, which is not about that at all, because it's rooted in the gospel. So today I had a bit of an experience. I decided to go to the church in Greenwich Village, where Thomas Merton spent some time in the 1930s. I went on a pilgrimage, and that pilgrimage, as Marielle knows, made me almost 20 minutes late to meet her for coffee. So God bless you for your ministry, your patience, your kindness, member of St. Bart's community. As I eventually rushed in, and you were like, oh, no problem, no problem. And I was like, I've had an experience. And I have had an experience because also, me being me, I didn't check whether or not it was open. I turned up, and the church was so not open. It was very much not open. And there's a school next door. And I thought, schools have offices. So I rang the doorbell for the school, and I was like, I am losing nothing by doing this, and also I am going on a plane back to London tomorrow, and I do not know when I'll be back. I hope it's not that long from now, but I thought I lose nothing by ringing this bell and having this chat. And those of you who've got to know me realize that I probably, in the moment, I wasn't like, oh, should I? I was like, I'll obviously be doing this today. So I met this woman, and she said, the school and the church, they're in different buildings. But if you go back out, and if you walk along 6th, you can ring the doorbell for the church office, and maybe they will let you in. And I was like, I have understood my mission. It was like Sister Bartimaeus being like, please, have seconds, eat the cake. And I was like, all right, I'm on it. How could I not? The clock is ticking, and I ring the bell, and a guy says, yep, push the door. And I come in, and of course, even wearing a collar, it's like, madam, explain yourself. Now, St. Bart's, like St. James's in London, and like St. Joseph's in the village, all sorts of folks come in all the time. And I tell you what, that there are plenty of people who ring the equivalent of the office door at St. James's, and my colleagues and I are like, nope. And so being aware of this, really empathetically, I thought, no one has to let me in, no one has to do anything here. That's okay, that's okay. And as I waited in the moment between ringing the bell and someone saying yes, something arrived for me because of what we would be doing here in Imagine Worship with this reading, no matter what was going to happen next. And sometimes phrases just float to the surface for people, and the phrase that arrived for me was, remember your baptism. No matter what happens next, as part of the body of Christ, you have decided to come to this place. And then that reminded me of the Magi, who, they saw the star, and they could have been like, whoa, star, amazing, and then just like talked about it and stayed at home. That would have been okay. Maybe there would have been some revelation of God's presence with them at another moment or in a different way. But they were like, no, we've got to go. We have to be there in order to see what's going to happen next, even though we don't know what we're going to find. So the office manager says, yes, come on in. And I go up the stairs, and he's sitting at a desk, and I said, hello, I'm a priest from London, and I stumbled my way through something or other. I wasn't very articulate. And he said, ma'am, that's above my pay grade. And I was like, fair, okay. And he said, wait, I'm going to ask someone. So he knocks on the office door, and someone inside, and the door said, do not disturb. So I was like, isn't that above your pay grade? I wouldn't do that. But even so, clearly they all get on well, that's fine. He knocks on the office door, and this guy, who's a Dominican friar, so he's an order of preachers guy, which means that he's a Catholic monk. So he's got a white habit, he's got a big rosary, and he's maybe, I would say, mid-30s. I don't want to insult him. I know that we're online. I think he's mid-30s. I think you're mid-30s. I don't know. And he was in Washington for a long time. He's been in New York for the last 3 years. And I said, how do you find it? And he looked at me and he said, where else would I be? This is the best city in the world to pray. It's the best city in the world to worship. I love being here. And God's light just poured out of this man. And he was like, you know what? Priest to priest, come with me. I'm going to show you the church. So then it was just the two of us. The clock is ticking. At this point, I'm pretty sure that unless a miracle takes place on the subway, and that's not a place where miracles happen, at least not very often, my God, not on the sea, not today, that I was probably going to be late, and I felt really bad, and you were really kind about it, but I thought something is happening here, so let's see what's up. And we went right up to the sanctuary. He told me all about the art. We spent time, and he said, what have you come here for today? And I said, I've come here for whatever is happening right now. And I thought to myself again, internally, remember your baptism. And we've exchanged email addresses, and he seems like a lovely guy. And it was so good to talk about ministry in New York together, because I don't work here in this diocese. I am a visitor from London. And he was basically like priest to priest, person to person. How can I pray for you in your parish? How can you pray for me and mine? And it was ecumenical, and it was so beautiful. And I'm so glad I went, because there's nothing like being there. And I think that's the deal for the invitation and the quality of experience between Jesus and John the Baptist. They're inviting each other because they are both God's beloved, like each and every one of us is God's beloved. There is nothing like being there. There's nothing like saying yes. But sometimes you have to ring the doorbell and see what happens. And the worst that can happen is that it turns out to really be closed. But that's a closed church. That's not heaven being closed. That's not God's invitation being closed. That's just, from my point of view, not reading the website properly, doing your homework, and turning up to a closed church. That's not a thing. That would have been fine. But maybe, every once in a while, you can do something or say something that forms a connection, like another little pebble in another little pond. And as I looked at this man, I thought to myself again, body of Christ. And he looks at me, not having heard that, because that was internal dialogue on my part. I do have one. And he looks at me and he says, you know, the great cloud of witnesses. And the great cloud of witnesses from Hebrews 12 is one of my very favorite passages ever. And so with that in mind, I'm going to read this little quote. Thomas Merton's friend, talking to him. And I think that this is certainly for all of us, no matter where you've been or what you've done with your day, or whether you were late or on time for anything. Lax said, no, all that is necessary to be a saint is to want to be one. Don't you believe that God will make you what God created you to be if you will consent to let God do it? All you have to do is desire it. Amen.